Previously on the all-new adventures of the Doctor Who Book Club podcast.
For April, I decided to go with The Empire of Glass by Andy Lane, which is a Virgin missing adventure, first published in November of 1995, and it was later selected to be published for free in the early 2000s on the BBC website with some additional illustrations. So it's one of the few missing adventures that has pictures.
Yes.
And it's a First Doctor, Vicky, and Steven story. And I don't think we've read a novel with that particular combination of TARDIS team before.
I don't think so. I mean, I don't think there are many of them, but yeah. Cool. This is a story with medical roots, and I will explain more on that next month, if folks don't already know.
And now our story continues.
Welcome, everyone, to the all-new adventures of the Doctor Who Book Club podcast. This is Matt in Minnesota.
Chris in South London. How's it going, Matt?
Well, by the time this episode goes out, it's likely, dear listener, that you've already seen a quarter of the new season. If they're doing another double feature for the first two episodes.
Yes.
We have not seen them yet, so...
No. I hope they're good. I hope there's no space babies.
The second one in particular looks quite interesting, the animated one.
Yes. I've been trying to keep my powder dry. So, I didn't know that the animated one was the second one until you just said it.
Oh.
That's fine, no worries. I know that the finale is called The Reality War, and that's kind of pretty much it.
Makes me wonder if they're going to visit the land of fiction, or if... I'm sure Mrs. Flood has something to do with it all.
Yes, possibly so.
How have you been, Chris?
Yeah, good. The weather has definitely kind of changed. The clocks have changed. So I'll be able to record this without having to put the light on.
Spring has sprung.
The spring has sprung. It's still a little chilly, but it's good. Yesterday, we had a elongated day trip somewhere, which you might hear more later. In show and tell.
Interesting. But before we get there, I do have a couple of book news items to share.
Indeed.
So the original 15th Doctor novels that we had mentioned, the two hardcovers that are due out May 29th, we've now learned that Emily Cook's Fear Death by Water features the Doctor flying solo and is presumably set between Ncuti Gatwa's two seasons when the Christmas special aired. And then Hannah Ferguson's Spectral Scream will have upcoming companion or current companion Belinda Chandra, played by Radha Sethu, in this year's episodes. And both titles will be released simultaneously on hardback and audiobook. Spectral Scream is going to be read by Michelle Asante, who had a brief role in The Forest of the Night. And Fear Death by Water will be read by Susan Twist. And good things come in threes, so in addition, listings have appeared for a third novel by Esme Jackimi Pearson called The Moon Cruise, and this will be out later in the fall on November 13th. And that'll match last year's pattern where a third Gatwa novel came out later on in the late fall. And Jackimi Pearson previously wrote the novelization of The Church on Ruby Road.
That's interesting that we've got a Ncuti novel being released in the autumn. Because maybe that might mean that he's not regenerating at the end of the season? Because there seems to be some speculation, but I have no idea how true that is.
Yeah, I've heard rumors, but who knows?
Yeah.
We'll find out eventually.
Yes.
There were 3 Eccleston novels that were published after his regeneration.
Yeah,
too,
that's
so
true. That's true.
Anything's possible.
Yeah.
There were a couple of other news items in the book world. There's a new Kate Orman novel coming called The Mere Matter. This is one of those audio novels exclusive to Big Finish and will be narrated by John Colshaw, coming out in July of this summer and featuring the Third Doctor, Liz, and the Brigadier.
Oh, I'm looking forward to that, I must say.
Anything set in season 7 is good by me. I think it's a good combination.
Yes, and anything written by Kate Orman is good by me as well. So,
in 2 years, perhaps we can get to that one.
Yeah.
And then we have at least 4 more Target novelizations based on the last 2 seasons due out on July 10th. So from the previous season, we have Empire of Death by Scott Hancock. Curious if this will also include part 1, The Legend of Ruby Sunday, as I can't imagine there's enough there to sustain a novelization of standing around in VHS footage for an hour. But we'll see. And then from this season, we have The Robot Revolution by Una McCormick, which is the season premiere, followed by Lux by James Goss, and The Well by Gareth L. Powell, whom I think is a new writer to the Doctor Who franchise.
Yes, I know him.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's a highly acclaimed writer. He wrote and won awards for the Ak Ak Macaque trilogy.
That sounds like something that's Mars Attacks related.
Yes, he's won the British Fantasy Award, Locus Award, the BSFA. Yeah, he is highly regarded.
Very acclaimed.
Wow. He's spoken at my local writing group that I am chair of.
Oh. Well, I might need to get an autographed Target then.
Yes. Yeah. So I met him. Ak Ak Macaque is great fun. It's a kind of Marvel-esque. That might be doing a bit of a disservice, but it's an alternative history. It features a kind of a macaque who was in World War II as a kind of like a trained shooter.
Interesting. And I wonder what The Well is going to be about.
Yes.
We'll know by this time next month. But
Yeah.
And then finally, on the far distant horizon, it looks like Gary Russell will be updating his Doctor Who encyclopedia.
Okay.
Which I think was last updated when Matt Smith came on the scene. I seem to remember a composite image of 9th, 10th, and 11th Doctors on the last time that was updated.
Yeah.
And so this new fully revised and updated edition is coming out in hardcover on October 29th of 2026. So over a year out.
Yes, set your diaries. Okay.
But yeah, that is book news.
Cool.
So I think, Chris, this brings us to show and tell. And you alluded to something earlier.
Yes. Well, so like some months for show and tell, I sometimes find myself kind of thinking, what am I going to go for? And this month, I was thinking I was going to be in that situation. And then I had an absolute abundance of riches all in the last week. Including for my birthday getting a badge that said fantastic. I think it's an official Doctor Who badge.
Happy belated birthday.
Yes, thank you. And then yesterday we were in Canterbury and we went to, there's a museum. Oh, what's the name of it? I think it was called the Beads Museum. I might be wrong on that, but a quirky museum in Canterbury that has sort of all manner of weird taxidermy and Roman coins. And it's got the clangers, as in the creatures from the Sea Devil. And because Oliver Postgate, who was a fantastic puppeteer and animator for children's television, his studio was just outside Canterbury. So you've got the clangers, you've got Bagpuss, you've got Noggin the Nog, and they're all in this museum in Canterbury. And there's no signs saying, oh, yeah, come and meet Bagpuss. But I also appreciate children of today don't really know necessarily who the clangers or Bagpuss are. I mean, I think there was a updated version of the clangers from kind of last decade or so.
Yeah, the current generation has moved on to Teletubbies, I think, with the master's taste. Yeah,
we'll move back to Teletubbies. But yeah, it was fabulous museum. It's in the Small Films Gallery. And I'm just trying to get the name of it. At the Beanie, that was it. The Beanie House of Art and Knowledge. And also, the Beanie is free. I mean, they will recommend, well, they'll greatly receive donations from you. If you find yourself in Canterbury, don't bother going to the cathedral. You know, it's all that. Go to the Beanie and to see a bit of Doctor Who history and see the clangers.
Very cool.
Yes, and they had soup dragons and all of the Clangers supporting cast.
And that's almost the best kind of surprise where it's like not
Yeah.
advertised and you turn the corner in the museum and there they are.
Yeah, we were debating as to whether or not to go upstairs, and I was like, yeah, let's just go upstairs and have a look. There was some kind of like Roman stuff upstairs, so we thought we'd go and see that, get past the weird taxidermy, and then we saw the Clangers, and like Lauren said, that my face just lit up.
Excellent.
Yeah, how about you, Baz?
Well, Chris, I've made a small dent in my Big Finish collection,
Ooh.
and I've listened to a Big Finish play.
Ooh,
And
okay.
so earlier last month, around the time of the 8th of March and Women's Day, I decided to check out the third volume of Big Finish's 8th of March called Strange Chemistry. I skipped the story where Leela meets Madame Curie, but I listened to Fairies at the Bottom of the Garden by Carissa Hamilton Bannis.
Okay.
And this features a young Amelia Pond, played by Caitlin Blackwood,
Yes.
reprising her role,
Yes.
meeting up with Missy.
Oh,
And Missy is her guidance counselor. It feels very Grange Hill mixed with Class.
okay.
Sorry, Missy's playing Amy's therapist.
Yeah.
But it's quite good. Michelle Gomez delivering counseling advice to Caitlin Blackwood, who sounds remarkably like her cousin,
Yes.
Karen Gillan. I wish Rory and Mel's were in it.
Yeah.
Amy is around the age of 16 in it. Missy was quite good, but a little demure throughout it, although she does get a couple of scenes to really shine.
Yeah.
This is set back in the days where she's still trying to track the doctor down, so probably even before giving Clara the doctor's phone number.
Yeah.
And there's a great line where we learn Missy's kept tabs on all of the doctor's pets over the years because she never knows when she might need a hostage. And what better way to get the old family back together than a funeral? And Agador from Peladon gets a reference, and the fairy realm from The Shining Man and Torchwood
Yeah.
make a bit of a reappearance. So
Cool.
it's a fun little adventure
Cool.
tucked away in that volume. So
Oh, cool. I haven't listened, but that does sound great fun. It reminds me a little bit of almost book news. I know I've spoken in the past about the podcast Into the TARDIS, which is Big Finish's way of airing free content, so available in your podcatcher of choice with ads and stuff, which I guess helps pay for it, and it's there presumably as a taster. And they have just started, at time of recording, serializing Nightshade, the novel adaptation.
yes, which is also in my pile of shame. But here you can listen to it free.
Yes. It will take you, I think, most of April because it will be coming out in, I think, in like weekly episodes. And I assume that it's at least a 4-parter. Yeah, you can go and have a listen to that because I've been making my way through The Ravages, the Chris Eccleston one. Yeah, I will look forward to when Nightshade is complete, and then I'm sure I will devour that because I have fond memories of the book many, many years ago. But yeah, cool, excellent.
Yeah. And so this month we are reading and reviewing The Empire of Glass
Yeah.
by Andy Lane, which is a Doctor Who missing adventure featuring the first Doctor, Stephen Taylor, Vicky. She doesn't have a last name in this, but is eventually revealed to be Pallister. There's a great scene where the Doctor is trying to remember Vicky's last name, and he's just like, Vicky. And this was the 16th Virgin Missing Adventure, so about halfway through that range, and was published in November of 1995.
Yeah, so Andy Lane, he's written quite a few young Sherlock Holmes books. He's clearly a Sherlock Holmes fan because he also wrote All Consuming Fire, which was the 7th Doctor Sherlock Holmes crossover.
And I think he's from your university.
He is, yes.
The second Doctor Who author we know that is, or third counting yourself.
4th, Justin Richards.
Ah,
Fifth, Craig Hinton.
wow.
Yes. Yeah, it's a hotbed of Doctor Who. So it wasn't obviously so at the time I was there. But yeah, he's renowned for Sherlock Holmes. He also wrote the Banquo Legacy. And if you listen to the Power of Three episode on the Banquo Legacy, you may hear a familiar voice, namely mine, reading some of the extracts from that. And that was based on a manuscript that he wrote with Justin Richards, I think quite a while beforehand and was not written as a Doctor Who novel, but they then adapted it. And there's a bit of a mysterious story behind The Empire of Glass. So this will spoil nothing of it to tell you that this was written out of financial necessity, because apparently he needed to pay for a dental bill.
Oh.
And so when I said last time round that this book had medical roots, this is that. He needed to pay for some dental surgery, so the story goes. And so he asked, would it have been Peter Delville Evans at the time? I think it would have been. Can I please do another Doctor Who book? And I think they had a gap in the schedule for A Missing Adventure. And lo and behold, we get The Empire of Glass. So,
interesting. And
yes.
He's written 6 Doctor Who related books in total. So we mentioned All Consuming Fire, which this book acts as a prequel/sequel to in a couple of different ways, and we'll touch on those.
Yes.
Lucifer Rising with Jim Mortimer, Original Sin, and then, like you said, Banquo Legacy, and then he also wrote a Torchwood novel called Slow Decay.
Yeah.
So after this book was originally published, it was also serialized on the BBC Doctor Who website in the early 2000s. So listeners, if you're looking for an ebook copy, you may be able to utilize like archive.org and retrieve an officially licensed and released free version of the material.
Yeah.
And the printed version of the book contains 2 illustrations, almost as like a frontispiece and a back piece, but the digital version includes, I think, 10 or 11 additional illustrations that weren't present in the original printed book, but they're all done in the same style, and I believe all done by the same illustrator too.
Yes.
Illustrated by Mike Nicholson, and Paul Campbell did the cover.
Okay.
And this book has a number of untitled chapters and then a prologue and an epilogue, and I think that's where we start with our dramatic reading.
Yes, indeed. So our prologue for this month is read for us by Anna Rose, and Anna Rose is a fabulous horror writer. But yes, if you search out Anna Rose and horror, and you'll find her stuff. And she is an actor in the York area. So let's have a lesson.
Prologue, July 1587. 1 month. Mary Harries gazed out across the sparkling blue ocean at the departing ship. From her position on the cliff, she was looking down upon its deck, freshly scrubbed and glistening in the hot summer sunlight. Its sails were swollen with the breeze, and it listed slightly to one side as it began its long tack out of the harbour and its longer journey home. Gulls swooped low around its bows, and higher in the sky, the black squiggles of larger birds were wheeling and soaring. She couldn't tell what sort of birds they were, but there was a lot about New Albion that she couldn't recognise. Turning her attention back to the ship, she could see sailors scurry across the rigging like spiders on a cobweb. One of them turned around and gazed back toward the coast, shielding his eyes with his hand. His chest was bare, and he wore a bandana around his head. Seeing her, he waved in big, sweeping gestures. She waved too, choking back a sob. It was Jim. Even at that distance she recognised his sun-bleached hair, drawn back in a tarred pigtail and bouncing against his back as his powerful arms moved. Those arms which had pulled her close and held her tight. Those arms in whose embrace she had slept on many a night. Those powerful, tender arms. 1 month. She blinked, and the ship was blotted out by tears as if by a sudden squall. They spilled, hot and salty, down her cheeks and across her lips, and it was like tasting the salt on Jim's skin again as her mouth explored his body. A sudden sob made her shoulders convulse. Grief and loss twisted her stomach, and she hugged herself despite the heat that made her dress stick to her body, wishing that her arms were Jim's arms, and her tears were his lips. But it could never be so again. 1 month. That's how long she and Jim had been given together. That was how long it had been since the ship docked and the colonists had emerged, blinking and unsteady, into the heavy heat and the ever-present humidity. The voyage from England had taken 3 months, and of the 70 colonists who had started the journey, the inspirational words of Sir Walter Raleigh still ringing in their ears, almost 20 were now held in the bosom of Jesus. The rest had followed Governor White onto the soil of New Albion. While he sketched the strange new plants, they had built their cabins and planted their crops. The sailors, who on the ship had laughed at them and called them puke stockings, watched at first, amused, but after a few days some had joined in, lending their expertise and their strength. Mary had been cooking one night when Jim had walked over and told her that she was beautiful. He had a sailor's directness and a sailor's weather-beaten face, but he had the eyes of an angel, and nobody had ever told her that before. She had been happy for a while, so happy that she hadn't minded rising at dawn and working until long after the sun had set, trying to put the colony on a firm footing. Then the fever came, and the crops showed no sign of growing, and some of the sheep that they had brought with them from England sickened and died, and Governor White had decided to return to England when the ship left and ask advice. And the perfect idyll of hard days working and long nights spent in Jim's arms were at an end. The ship was smaller now, and Mary's eyes were half blinded by the sparkle of the sun on the water, but she could still see Jim's arm waving. It would be 6 months at least before Governor White returned, and it might not even be on the same ship. Perhaps the colony would survive, or good Queen Bess might decide that it was not worth sustaining. Wherever she ended up, Mary knew that it would not be with Jim. A moment in the sky caught Mary's attention. Glancing up, she noticed that the large birds were swooping lower, almost as if they had been waiting for the ship to leave. She dismissed the notion as fanciful. Even in the New World, birds were just birds. Casting one last glance at the departing ship, just a piece of flotsam, dark against the blue of the waves, she turned away toward the trees that hid the settlement. No doubt there would be 100 things to do when she got back. There always were. Governor White's daughter was almost 7 months with child now. Her belly stretched like the canvas of the ship's sails, and she was almost unable to work. That meant more for the rest of the women to do. More to do and nothing to show for it, not even a pair of strong arms in the night. The birds were plunging down behind the tree line now, and it occurred to Mary that they were larger than any birds she had ever seen before. Their bodies looked more like the shells of crabs, and their wings were the red of fresh blood. Perhaps the tears gumming her eyelashes together were magnifying things, or perhaps her grief at losing Jim was unhinging her reason, but surely no bird that ever flew looked like that. Mary began to move faster through the underbrush towards the trees and the path that led to the settlement. Bushes whipped at her legs, scratching her as she broke into a stumbling run. Someone in the settlement had started to scream like a pig about to be slaughtered, and behind the screams Mary could hear the flapping of huge wings. What was happening? What in God's good name was happening? She was barely 10 feet from the trees when the demon settled to the ground in front of her, furling its wings across its hard red back. Eyes on the end of stalks, like those of a snail, regarded her curiously. And as its claws reached out for her, she screamed and screamed. And for all the years following that moment, after everything that was done to her, in her head, she still screamed.
Thank you so much, Anna Rose, for reading that.
Mm-hmm. So you can find Anna Rose using the name Anna Rose James on Instagram by searching for Anna on the Page. And there you'll find all manner of stuff about her books and her performances and her art. So go along and have a browse, why don't you?
Cool. And so as we heard, the Roanoke colony in Virginia gets attacked.
Yes.
By flying creatures.
Yes. It's interesting that Doctor Who hasn't been to Roanoke before or since.
Well, sort of has now.
Yeah, well, you know what I mean, but
hasn't revisited it.
Yeah, but then again, it might be one of these things that's almost too obvious, and I think it does get covered a bit in, I think, American sci-fi fantasy type things, I think. But having said that, I'm struggling to think of an example. Yeah,
I think there's a Big Finish
is there?
story with the Sixth Doctor, Jago and Lightfoot, where they're trying to visit Roanoke, but they end up, I think, visiting a nearby settlement instead.
Right, okay, cool.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and jump right in.
Yeah, so it begins with a disappearance, because the Doctor unexpectedly vanishes from the TARDIS, but returns just as Steve and Vicky are starting to become seriously concerned. But he's got no memory of where he's been, only vaguely recalling that he's met a dandy and a clown. Mm-hmm. So he's gone off to go and do the Three Doctors.
I mean, the author does, make use of his missing memory there too to
Yes.
kind of further the plot.
Yes, later on. So in his pocket, he finds an invitation card, which, when placed on the console, causes the TARDIS to materialise on an island near Venice in the year 1609.
And from Stephen and Vicky's perspective, this adventure takes place between the Time Meddler and Galaxy 4. So somewhat early days for Stephen here.
Yes, yeah, very much.
And with the follow-on from the Time Meddler, very minor spoilers, folks, if you didn't see the front cover of this book, which features a giant floating island, we have back-to-back pseudo-historicals here from the companion perspective.
We do, yes. Which Vicky kind of puts a bit of a lampshade on later on in the book. So the Doctor and his companions don't know why they've been brought here, and they kind of suspect it might be a bit of a trap. Yeah, nonetheless, they cross the lagoon to the city. Whilst they're there, the Doctor is mistaken for Cardinal Bellarmine. He was a real person, was Cardinal Bellarmine, and he's a Catholic authority who is coming to Venice to pass judgment on Galileo Galilei's invention of the telescope.
Which Galileo, I think, calls a spyglass, and
Yes.
is, I think the Doctor names it as the telescope later on in the... And Galileo's like, oh, from the Greek word, I kind of like that.
Yes. So the Doctor, Stephen and Vicky are taken to guest quarters in the Doge's palace. So listeners, I'm sorry if you're wanting to escape kind of events in America. We have quite a few references to Doge, but by this we don't mean Elon Musk.
Yes, when I read that, I did a huge face palm. I was like, oh, our legacy of current events following us into the podcast continues. Because we have the Doge's palace.
Yes. And the Doctor warns Stephen and Vicky to be very careful about their actions in the city, because Venice has grown rich due to its prime location on a major trade route between Europe and West Asia, and the people of the city live in constant fear of Turkish spies mapping out the network of sandbanks which protects the city from invasion. And Venice is ruled by shadowy committees, elected almost at random to ensure that no one person acquires ultimate power. But there are still many noble families in the city whom it is unwise to annoy.
Yeah, and there's references to like committees of 12 and groups of 7 and groups of 3, and it kind of funnels up through to the Doge. And
Yes.
All right. And so we also then meet Galileo in person, who has no intention of revealing to the Doge that he was inspired by the design of the telescope from Hans Lippershey in Germany, and is testing his invention looking at the moon when he sees what appears to be a flying disc traveling from the moon to the Earth. And disturbed by what he's seen, he heads for a nearby tavern and gets very wasted. And shortly afterwards, an alien being emerges from the canal outside, encountering and killing Galileo's landlord, whose name is Carlo Zeno, on the way. And Galileo's like behind in his rent, and there's a whole subplot about that. And at the tavern, a stranger buys Galileo a drink after accidentally spilling his first, but then Galileo's accosted by a group of hot-headed youths who accuse him of disputing God's preeminence in the heavens. And the book has a lot to say about religion and its impact and influence on society.
Yes.
Galileo tosses his drink in young Baldassare Nicoletti's face and prepares to take his leave, but his drink turns out to contain poison, and Nicoletti dies within seconds, which, if it's skin contact, I'm wondering if it was more like an acid or something. Galileo flees the scene and encounters Stephen, who had just stumbled across Zeno's body near one of the canals, and both soon determine that the other is innocent of the murder, which is a lovely little scene.
Yes.
And since neither wishes to draw the authorities' attention, they decide to dispose of the body in the canal and go out drinking together, which is a little bit reminiscent of a scene in Flux where Dan and Yaz decide to get rid of a corpse at a porthole.
Yeah. So the Nicoletti family were basically a gang faction of Venice. They were two rival factions into which the working classes of Venice was divided. So Nicoletti wore black caps, and their rivals, the Castellani, wore red. So I don't think this particular Nicoletti was a real person, but there's lots of real life historical figures that are going to be characteristic of this.
It's a celebrity historical
par excellence.
Yeah.
It's almost a Three Doctors of celebrity historicals.
And we should mention too, so when the TARDIS materialized on this like remote island near like Venice in like the harbor or the bay or out in the ocean,
The lagoon, yeah.
Yeah. The Doctor has like a collapsible, inflatable dinghy. That's how they get from the island to Venice. And then the Doctor stores that in his pocket for later. So that shows up a couple of times. And it is very early days for Stephen, and he's still plagued by nightmares from his time on Mechanus.
Yes, yeah.
And Vicky is likewise still a little bit resentful at Barbara for killing her pet.
Yeah, that's a bit odd. I'm happy about Stephen because this is only Stephen's third story. I mean, Vicky has been travelling for a bit. I mean, sure, but like she had been spending quite a bit of time trapped by the time of the rescue. But I don't know. A little bit of me kind of thinks she might have got over it by now. But also I appreciate Andy Lane trying to flesh out these characters because there is not a lot there on telly.
Yeah, there are some very much like character development scenes which pop up throughout the work, which I did appreciate.
Yeah.
And the author does make a point to acknowledge that both of these companions were from the future.
Yes.
So, for example, the Doctor has to clarify to Vicky that Italy was invaded over the years by Earth tribes and not alien invasions. Or at least not yet, because the fish vampires are, I'm sure, lurking about as well.
Yes.
It does give it a bit of a different vibe when none of the companions are from the past or the modern era.
Yes.
So that was kind of a nice change, I guess.
Yeah, so whilst Stephen is doing a little bit of body disposal, Vicky has been dreaming of a flying creature named Albrellian, who praises her beauty. And the next morning, though, she finds scratches on her windowsill and realises it wasn't a dream. Guards arrive to escort the Doctor to his next appointment because they think that he's Cardinal Bellarmine. But Vicky becomes suspicious when she hears them discussing problems with Envoy Abrelian, so the flying creature.
Which is kind of like a giant ladybug with extra arms and...
Yes, and also Abrelian has his own unique syntax, which takes a while to kind of get used to, I think. But I do appreciate the fact that if you're speaking a kind of like a different language, you'll be operating with a different syntax. And so his English is being translated fine. It's just the word order is often a little bit all over the place, but you can see how it makes sense. At least I felt I could.
Yeah, kind of like Yoda.
I think it was more consistent than Yoda. I would say, because I've been learning a bit of Italian, not for this book, but in preparation of a trip coming up, and I've been quite interested by like in Italian, instead of saying like my dog, you will say my dog, and there's various other kind of things, and you can just see I had sympathy for Albrellian, I must say, just on the language point alone, my sympathy for Albrellian may become slightly limited. So, Vicky's overheard these guards who've come to escort the Doctor, and the fact that they know about this, flying ladybird. So, she and the Doctor flee when the guards are revealed to be aliens wearing holographic disguises. And in fact, they are Jamarians.
These are kind of like perception filters, so they're like holographic. They're not like shapeshifters.
Yeah, we don't use the term perception filters, I don't think, in the book, but like that's what we would call it now. And the Jamarians, these aliens, retreat when real human guards arrive and report their failure to their employer, Irving Braxiatel. Is it Braxiatel? Braxiatel.
As Lisa Barrowman corrected you.
I know.
It's Braxiatel.
Braxiatel. I know. Sorry, Lisa. So Braxiatel is unable to understand why the Doctor would flee from Braxiatel's agents. And he concludes that the Jamarians have tried to contact the wrong person. And he sends them out to locate the real Doctor. And they eventually report that an old man is approaching Venice in a coach. So to ensure there are no misunderstandings, Braxiatel sends some of the other envoys from his conference to contact the old man, who is the real Cardinal Bellarmine.
So you have kind of a massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve situation going on.
Yes, yeah. But if you look at a portrait of Cardinal Bellarmine in real life, he had a beard. So maybe in later life he kind of like became clean shaven. I don't know. And also Bellarmine was known as Doctor of the Church, which is possibly why Andy Lane picked him for this. And Bellarmine faints from joy upon seeing the aliens, because he thinks that they're angels who've come to transport him to heaven.
And to describe these aliens, so the Jamarians, a nod to He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. They look like Mosquitor.
Yes.
They have a long snout that's like a dagger, and that's how Galileo's landlord dies, as he gets impaled by one of these protuberances.
Yeah.
But they're depicted in some of the illustrations and stuff.
Yeah. So Braxiatel doesn't know that the real Cardinal Bellarmine is thinking there's angels and everything. So instead, he's preparing to vacate his rented house in Venice and return to the island Laputa for the conference that he's been planning. But before leaving, he tells the Jamarians to take care of this imposter who's pretending to be the Doctor. So this is getting quite confusing.
Yes, you've got the court intrigue and
Yes.
all of the hallmarks of a first Doctor, like in the Romans type
Yeah.
situation. And Laputa is originally from Jonathan Swift and Gulliver's Travels.
Okay, yes.
Not originally from Castle in the Sky, which is what I had thought last month, but Miyazaki had gotten inspiration from Gulliver's Travels for that. And then, so Stephen, after a night out drinking, wakes up in Galileo's home with a severe hangover, and Galileo lends him some clean clothing, which is a little less anachronistic than what Stephen was wearing previously, and tells him to invite his friends, the Doctor and Vicky, to Galileo's for dinner. And on his way back to the Doge's palace, Stephen is accosted by the Nicolettis, who see his clothing and assume him to be Galileo and attempt to kill him. So I guess Galileo is wearing some very distinctive clothes.
Yes.
And he's saved by a stranger named Giovanni Chigi, who realizes that Stephen is English and wants to know why so many Englishmen wearing odd fashions have recently arrived in Venice. And unable to help Chigi with his inquiries, Stephen returns to the Doge's palace to pass on Galileo's invitation to the Doctor and Vicky. And they share a pleasant dinner until Galileo offers to demonstrate his telescope and finds that the lenses have been smashed. And when he describes the odd sight that he witnessed the previous night about the point of light moving from the moon to the Earth, the Doctor and Stephen realize that Galileo saw an alien spaceship. And disturbed, they return to the Doge's palace, where Abrelian is once again waiting on Vicky's windowsill. And Abrelian appears confused when the Doctor claims not to know what he's doing there, and apparently concluding that the Doctor's playing mind games with him in order to extract vital concessions. Albrarian then kidnaps Vicky, telling the Doctor that he knows where she can be found once he's ready to talk sensibly.
Yes. So given that we were reading this in the backdrop of another kind of like peace talk and conferences, various modern parallels just kind of like rock up.
I was very surprised when Irving Braxiatel showed up in the book because, you know, he's very often paired with, like, say, the Seventh Doctor.
Yeah.
Or Bernice Summerfield. I think we've
Yes.
encountered him a few times in some of the Benny books we've read.
Yes.
And it's very early days for him as well.
Yes.
And it's not mentioned outright in this book, but there's a sense that him and the Doctor are brothers.
Yes.
It's kind of, I guess, common knowledge, but it's not revealed here. They kind of dance around the topic. Braxiatel doesn't seem surprised to encounter the first Doctor's incarnation. The Doctor's pleasantly surprised that Braxiatel's gotten off of Gallifrey. So there's some, I think they're encountering each other at the appropriate times in each of their incarnations.
Yes.
And Braxiatel's just very much beginning his library, which will eventually become the Braxiatel collection.
Yeah. I knew that he was going to be in this book because I remember that from kind of like publicity at the time. Because I think Braxiatel was mentioned on air in, is it The City of Death?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, so I do like the fact that we're seeing this like one-off reference to a comedy name that Douglas Adams thought up, presumably, just having it being expanded upon. But there is a little bit of the Doctor and Braxiatel about to say that they're brothers and then get interrupted by people.
The dinner at Galileo's was lovely. There was lots of discussion about the Doctor's philosophy and outlook on life and Galileo's, and they both kind of realized that they're both agnostic, or at least don't bow to the authority of the church at the time, and there's some kinship and mutual respect that's developed during that meeting.
Yeah, there is some lovely character work in this book. So the Doctor fetches another telescope from the TARDIS.
Which in of itself is a long, because they have to row all the way back out there.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
he makes
yeah.
Galileo do it. And then row all the way back.
Right, so he and Galileo are attacked by a Gemarian, and Galileo damages the telescope tube beyond repair whilst fighting it off. But the Doctor manages to place the undamaged lenses from his telescope into Galileo's tube, and so meaning that they've now got a working telescope, which the two of them use to spot another flying saucer and triangulate its landing position. As they discuss their discovery and also start planning to rescue Vicky, they're attacked again. And this time the Doctor overpowers the alien assassin and manages to steal the holographic unit it's been using to disguise itself as kind of being human. It's these scenes where it gets a little bit Assassin's Creed.
Different assassins with different motivations. And
Yes.
the Doctor being surprisingly spry and fighting them off with like his cane and stuff.
Yeah, and also isn't Galileo fighting someone on a rooftop at some point as well? Yeah, so it's very Assassin's Creed.
So then back with Stephen, he's forced to dive into a canal to avoid the vengeful Nicolettis. And whilst underwater, he sees or feels like a large object move past him, which is Braxiatel's shuttle, leaving an underground dock and making its way in the canals out into the lagoon. And Stephen swims inside, I guess, his underwater garage to investigate, only to find that Giovanni Chiggy is already there. And Chiggy and Stephen retire to a tavern to compare notes. And Chiggy explains that he followed the crowds of mysterious Englishmen to Braxiatel's house and broke in to investigate further. And then as they talk, Chiggy is surprised by the arrival of an old acquaintance, William Shakespeare, who just shows up, who had been sent to Venice by spymaster Thomas Walsingham to investigate rumors of a conference being held by a mysterious new empire. And Shakespeare is even more surprised to run into Chiggy and to recognize him as a man who he thought had long been dead, his old friend, Christopher Marlowe.
Yes.
So we have Marlowe, Galileo, and Shakespeare, which I mean, they were all contemporaries at the time, but I don't know that at least Galileo had met any of them. And I started thinking like, okay, my reference point for this period really is the two Elizabeth movies with Cate Blanchett. So I'm like, okay, Walsingham was Geoffrey Rush's character in Elizabeth. And apparently there's a whole line of thought or research that Shakespeare may have been a spy. I was doing some Googling, and if Julia Child could do it, maybe Shakespeare could too.
Yeah.
Although at this point in his career, Shakespeare had already written both Othello and The Merchant of Venice.
Yeah. But I mean, certainly he knows quite a bit about places that it's possibly unlikely that he might have been to. So, I mean, it's certainly, if he'd just been a kind of like an actor who'd grown up in Stratford. So, I mean, I don't know enough to sort of like say one way or another. But I find it interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the inclusion of Shakespeare sent me down a whole rabbit hole learning about quattros and false folios and the first through fourth folios and all sorts of interesting stuff and missing plays and all of that.
Yes. I did slightly fear, is this going to turn into like a medieval Da Vinci Code? But also predates Da Vinci Code by a bit.
And predates Assassin's Creed.
It does. It does not, though, predate the work of Tim Powers, and I might talk about Tim Powers a bit later. So Marlowe reminds me, Canterbury is full of references to Marlowe, because he was from Canterbury. Yesterday, we spent quite a bit of time walking past the Marlowe Theatre, and there's lots of stuff, because I'd imagined that Canterbury would have been all about Chaucer. But it's like one of the wonderful things about Canterbury is that everywhere you turn, you're going, oh, that's here. Oh, right. Oh, okay, fine. Or this person was here. And like Ian Jury of Ian Jury and the Blockheads taught in Canterbury. That's a name that might not mean much to non-British audiences.
But a song was featured in Tooth and Claw at the beginning. Hit me with your rhythm stick. So
Yeah.
there's a Doctor Who connection.
Anyway, all right, that's enough of my work for the Canterbury Tourist Board. Yeah, so Braxitel is furious when Albrellian, our ladybird, ladybug type alien, has brought Vicky to Lapita, claiming that he's in love with her.
And I kind of rolled my eyes with this, like, Vicky getting sexually harassed by Albrarian. But then it also happens to Stephen because Marlowe very much falls in love with Stephen. So at least Andy Lane is an equal opportunity.
Yes.
Having the companions get harassed sort of deal.
Yes. Yeah, so at first, Braxitel thinks that Albrellian has kidnapped an innocent Venetian girl. But when Vicky explains that she's a companion of the Doctor and tells him her story, he realises, as Braxitel, that the situation's even worse. So Laputa is where... Is it Laputa or Lapita? Sorry.
Laputa.
Lapita.
That's a pronunciation in Castle in the Sky, so...
Okay, fine.
That's where I'm getting that from.
Yeah, so Lapita is the site of the... this is another word I have difficulty pronouncing.
Armageddon.
The Armageddon, yes. The Armageddon Convention. So it's a conference which Braxitel has organised to limit the use of weapons of mass destruction in galactic wars.
And interestingly, it was first mentioned in Doctor Who in Revenge of the Cybermen.
Yes, it was. So after much delicate negotiation, Braxitel has convinced most of the galaxy's major powers to participate, but only if the Doctor acts as chairman, and the Doctor's become well known for his campaigning work against miniscopes. So as we will see later in the Doctor's timeline. When Braxitel's people took the Doctor out of time to deal with the Omega crisis, they passed on Braxitel's invitation to him. But unfortunately, they've given it to the first Doctor rather than the second or the third. And when they've erased his memories of his own future, the Doctor's forgotten what the invitation was for. So that's a bit of an oversight by the Doctor's people.
And there are lots of different alien delegates that are participating.
Oh, yes.
Judging by the descriptions, we get, I think, Santarans, Rutans, Ice Warriors, but no Daleks or Cybermen.
Yes, possibly for licensing reasons, but also I think like they are explicitly, I think they kill the peace envoys that have been sent there to try to get them to come along to the conference. So due to all of this confusion, Cardinal Bellarmine is now chairing this conference, and the delegates believe him to be the Doctor. But Bellarmine thinks that he's mediating between sort of various angels in a war in heaven, and is using imagery from the Book of Revelations to settle disputes between the alien factions.
And he's making really...
good progress.
Well, interesting decisions because they're like, oh, can we use chemical weapons? Can we use plagues and poisons? And Bellarmine is like, well, God did it, so it must be okay. So he's saying yes to all of these and using the Bible as justification for it.
Yeah. And it's interesting because this is a book that's written in the 90s, right?
Mm-hmm.
And George W. Bush and Tony Blair had discussions about Francis of Assisi and Francis of Assisi's thoughts and wisdom regarding the invasion of Iraq.
Prescient in that sense, yeah.
Really prescient. But yeah, so Braxitel decides to let the Cardinal just kind of do this, whatever this is. However, this doesn't explain who's been trying to kill Galileo, when Braxitel had only ordered the Gemarians to sabotage his telescope in order to prevent Galileo from spotting the delegate ships. So there's a bit of a mystery going on here.
You know, when Vicky mentions that, that she's traveling with the Doctor, Albrarian has a really interesting reaction to that, where Albrarian calls the Doctor the stuff of legend, having heard about the Doctor's deeds. And it kind of makes sense that the Doctor would encounter people like that in the wrong order, where some might be aware of like the legend that the Doctor turns into. And we get hints of that in Twice Upon a Time, when testimony reveals to the first Doctor, like, here's what you become.
Yeah.
It's really interesting seeing that, and also specifically, the stuff of legend, which Big Finish used recently for their 8th Doctor and Charlie live play.
Yeah.
And then I think the 10th Doctor says to Rose at the end of the Satan Pit too, where he calls them the stuff of legend. And I'm wondering if that was the first use of that was here, perhaps.
I think it could well have been. But also, as well, so you were saying about who the Doctor is going to be. Of course, nowadays, for the Timeless Child, it's kind of like who the Doctor has been previously.
Has always been, yeah.
Yeah.
So back in Venice, Marlowe explains to Stephen and Shakespeare that he also is a spy for Walsingham, and that his apparent death in a pub brawl was faked in order to save him from Walsingham's enemies, and ever since he's continued to act as a secret agent for England, almost in a Series 6B sort of capacity. And some years ago, while investigating charges of treason against Sir Walter Raleigh, he had visited the American colony of Roanoke, where he saw the flying demons kidnapped various colonists, as we heard in our opening prologue. And somehow Marlowe survived and escaped, although sometime later he was shot in a duel, and his surgeon found and removed a strange piece of metal from his body. And Marlowe had followed the trail of the missing colonists to Venice, and while there, trying to find out why they were all suddenly congregating, he had heard rumors of a mysterious conference, the Armageddon Convention, which he had reported to Walsingham, and that's what caused Shakespeare to be sent to investigate further. You'd think Walsingham would have found a less high-profile spy, perhaps, and Shakespeare's talents would have been better served in, say, the English courts and stuff, but anyway. And then Stephen takes Shakespeare and Marlowe to the Doctor to tell their story, but as they ponder their next move, a representative of the Doge arrives and instructs Galileo to present his telescope for inspection. The Doctor, however, needs Galileo's help to find Laputa and rescue Vicky, and so he asks Stephen to use the stolen perception filter, the holographic unit, to impersonate Galileo and present the telescope to the Doge on his behalf, thus ensuring history proceeds as it should. And then meanwhile, the Doctor, Galileo, and Shakespeare rent out a boat and head out for Laputa because it's farther out than I think what the Doctor's dinghy could carry them. But they soon realize that there's some additional boats on their tail full of the English folk who were the kidnapped Roanoke colonists, whose bodies are now beginning to show signs of radiation sickness. So their skin is like bubbling, and I think some of them are losing their eyes, and just really nasty stuff.
It's quite grim, So Braxitel explains to Vicky that his people, so the Time Lords, have surrounded the Earth with defensive satellites, and the delegates' flagships are all parked on the moon to keep them out of harm's way. But while dining, Vicky overhears part of a conversation between the Greld delegates.
And so the Greld, not to be confused with the Grell from Oh No It Isn't, or the Gelth from The Unquiet Dead. The Greld were a reference to Original Sin, one of Andy Lane's earlier works, where it's revealed that the Earth Empire later destroys the Greld homeworld.
Yeah. So this conversation that Vicky's overhearing makes it seem that Albarine is trying to duck out of a vow they had all made to sacrifice themselves for a greater purpose. Yeah, so he's up to something, but we kind of know that anyway. But before Vicky can warn Braxitel, Albarine kidnaps her again.
Yes.
This time explaining he doesn't really love her, but wants to take advantage of her knowledge of future history, and they must get away before it's too late. And so remember as well, this is all being explained in kind of like fairly broken syntax. Mm-hmm. So it takes Vicky and I think the reader a
fair bit to work it out.
Yeah, to go what? So the Greld are galactic arms merchants who've only agreed to participate in the convention in order to sabotage it. While the convention was being set up, the Greld attacked an isolated colony of humans and planted hypnocontrollers and fragments of a metacobalt bomb into their bodies and scattered them across the planet to avoid detection. As soon as the convention began, the Greld had sent a signal summoning their victims to Laputa. And since each human only contains a fragment of the bomb, the defenders on the island will not perceive them as weapons. Once they've all gathered together, the bomb will reach critical mass and explode, destroying the convention. So it's kind of like almost like Voltron or some other kind of giant transformer thing.
Yeah, the pieces of the bomb need to get critical mass in order to function. And that is like a Voltron version of a bomb sort of deal.
Yes.
Laputa, too, is a bit of a in-joke from Jonathan Swift in that La Puta in Spanish means something very bad. So it's interesting listening to the Spanish translation of Castle in the Sky for that reason, because it's kind of unavoidable to get around. But yeah. So back again in Venice, Stephen disguises himself as Galileo using the perception filter and presents the telescope to the Doge, who is quick to grasp the military applications once he holds it the right way around in terms of aiding defenses and being able to see farther. And before Stephen can depart, however, he's caught and challenged to a duel by Thomas Nicoletti, who was the father of Baldassare, his son who was killed in that acid or poison attack. And to save Galileo from being hunted down and killed, Stephen must agree to the fight, even though he knows he can't win. Marlowe offers to take his place using the holographic disguise unit, which Stephen reluctantly agrees to, but Marlowe loses the duel and is fatally wounded. The desperate Stephen then takes Marlowe to Braxiatel's home and uses the skiff in the docking port to take him to Laputa for treatment, but despite his best efforts, Marlowe dies along the way. And while tending to his wounds, Stephen finds a metal device buried within Marlowe's body. So he's kind of been hollowed out. Not unlike the Ironside in Victory of the Daleks, that one scientist.
Yeah.
Who is also a bomb, or part of a bomb. Meanwhile, the Dr. Galileo and Shakespeare reach Laputa moments ahead of the colonists, who are showing ever more advanced signs of radiation sickness as the fragments of the bomb come into close proximity and begin to react to each other on a radioactive level. And the doctors guessed the significance of their symptoms, but although he manages to warn Braxiatel of the danger, the colonists are all still able to make it to the beach and land before Braxiatel can launch his floating island into the air. However, the bomb does not yet explode, indicating that a vital component, which is the wiring within Marlowe, he's kind of acts as the fuse of the bomb, is still missing.
Meanwhile, Albrellian takes Vicky to the moon, intending to depart with his prize, only to find the Germarians are looting the ships of the other delegates.
Almost in like a Ferengi style.
Yes, and Braxiatel had chosen them as his servants since they were an isolated race of the Germarians, with no special loyalty to any of the races attending the convention. But he has underestimated them. A little bit like the Doctor's other possible sibling, kind of making alliances and kind of getting it wrong. So they intend to take advantage of their position to loot the other races' ships and use the stolen technology to create an empire of their own. Realising how badly both he and Braxiatel have miscalculated, Albrellian steals the telepathic data storage unit that the Germarians have been using to teach them how to use their stolen tech. And Albrellian and Vicky escape and return to Laputa to warn Braxiatel of the danger. But as the Germarians turn on Braxiatel, Shakespeare grabs the storage unit, empties its contents into his mind, and rushes off to steal a skiff and return to King James, bearing knowledge of new technology which will enable England to conquer the world.
I would think if Shakespeare obtained all that knowledge, he might realize that handing it over to King James might not be in the world's best interests, but he's very motivated by nationalistic tendencies, shall we say.
Yes.
Here.
Yes, he is somewhat.
We also get a reference to the first Doctor reminding Shakespeare of an encounter where Shakespeare's like, you remind me of someone, and he describes the fourth Doctor who had helped him write Hamlet, which is a reference to City of Death, and later a short story that appeared in a 1993 issue of DWM as a Brief Encounter.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting that City of Death gives us both that reference and then also, that's where the Braxiatel collection is first mentioned.
Yeah.
Didn't expect Marlowe to die here, But I guess in real life, did he die in that bar fight some 15 years earlier?
Yeah, he died in Deptford.
Okay.
Yeah, though I think there is genuinely a bit of mystery about it. Yeah, so like maybe there's enough room there to create this.
Even on his deathbed, Marlowe was still hitting on Stephen,
Yes,
asking him for a kiss. And it was very much in the King James, more on him later, and Ryan dynamic that we saw in The Witchfinders.
Yes, yeah. There is genuine academic speculation that possibly Marlowe's death was faked.
And the book makes a big deal about the island being able to take off and stuff, and it was kind of like this, as these ships are approaching carrying these Roanoke colonists that have been infected with this radiation, almost acting like zombies, and they're moments away from landing, and Braxitel's like, I'm going to take the island up, and it's meant to be like this big reveal, but again, double spoiled by naming the island Laputa and then depicting it on the cover flying. Yeah. So some of the dramatic effect there was lost with some of those spoilers. But anyway, so the Doctor and Vicky pursue Shakespeare in another saucer skiff, and Braxitel grounds the others to prevent the Gemarians from following or returning to the moon, while he pilots the flying island itself towards England in pursuit. And there was a moment there where the Doctor's mannerism seemed a little bit off, because the Doctor asks Brax, hey, can I fly the island back to Laputa? Almost like an excited kid. And I chalk that up to him maybe acting differently around his brother than he would, say, his companions, where he's, the stern older gentleman, kind of a different sense of shorthand and familiarity with a member of his own people. But those notable, I would say. Yeah. And then at the moment Stephen's skiff arrives, bearing Marlowe, who again is this fuse of the meta-cobalt bomb, Marlowe's hypno-controller, which had been removed by the surgeon who operated upon him after his duel, so kind of like removing the Order 66 chip, if you will, from Star Wars, preventing him from receiving the order to travel to Laputa with the other colonists, although he may have subconsciously been influenced to follow them anyway. But if Stephen lands, the proximity of the fuse will detonate the rest of the meta-cobalt bomb, and so accepting responsibility for his actions, Elbrarian, the ladybug, flies up to the approaching skiff under his own power, removes the detonator from Marlowe's body, and flies away with it. And following Elbrarian's instructions, Stephen jams the skiff's hatch open and leaps out as it lands. The Gemarians then pile in, intending to use this one functioning skiff to pursue Shakespeare and recover the data storage unit. But before they can launch, Elbrarian uses the hypno-controller to send the Roanoke colonists into the skiff, and the Gemarians launch too late, with Elbrarian waiting in the sky for the skiff to clear the island before flying towards it with a detonator, causing the bomb to reach critical mass and explode when he gets close enough in proximity.
Yeah.
So it creates a huge explosion in the sky above England.
Yes. Of which there is no historical record. Yes. So using the knowledge he's acquired from the data storage unit, Shakespeare pilots his skiff to Hampton Court Palace, where his theatrical troupe is performing Macbeth for King James.
For the first time. I think it's the first ever.
It is, indeed. Shakespeare, he's a little bit upset that I think he feels that they're rushing the performance, and I think he's kind of like casting aspersions about Richard Burbage, who was a great, renowned, real-life Elizabethan actor. Also, Shakespeare, he is learning all manner of scientific terms. He doesn't, because of the knowledge that's seeping into his brain as he becomes like the Dr. Donner du jour. But he doesn't sometimes understand what these terms are, and he's finding it a little bit bewildering, but he's trying to plough on. He knows he's not able to interrupt the king's entertainment, but he has to take part in the performance himself when he learns that the actor who was due to play Lady Macbeth has fallen ill. Because in those days, men played the parts of women because it was scandalous for there to be a female actor.
Mm-hmm. And there's some rumor to that as well, that Shakespeare did step in and play the part at one of the first performances.
Yeah.
Also kind of based in quasi-myth /
Yes.
fact.
Yeah. I mean, there's also some speculation that Shakespeare's works were in part written by a woman. Or women. There is all manner of Shakespearean mythology. So the Doctor and Vicky managed to catch up to Shakespeare and take on the roles of a doctor and his servant in order to get close to Shakespeare on stage. And the explosion of the Jamarian shuttle distracts the members of the court, giving the Doctor the opportunity he needs to force feed an amnesia pill to Shakespeare and erase his memory of the last 24 hours. So it's quite a convenient pill to have.
It's almost like Braxiatel and Captain Jack get their supply of retcon from the same supplier.
Yeah, so the Doctor and Vicky then return to Laputa, the Flying Island, where they learn that the convention has come to a successful conclusion, with the delegates all unaware of what has been happening outside the convention hall. And Braxiatel gives amnesia pills to both Galileo and Cardinal Bellarmine and return them to Venice to resume their ordinary lives. And the Doctor and his companions depart, whilst Braxiatel vows to give up politics and take up collecting instead, which he will find just as eventful in its own way. But yeah, so that's The Empire of Glass.
It is.
What do you make of it?
I had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. It had a lot going on, a lot of moving pieces, but they all sort of fit together by the end and made sense.
Yeah.
But there were parts where I was kind of scratching my head wondering, like, how is this all going to come together? But it
Yes,
eventually
yeah.
does. And the sequence at the end with King James and the performance of the Scottish play was all quite fun. And the scene of the Doctor like choking Shakespeare on stage to get him to swallow the pill. And I mean, there were a lot of memorable moments in this, and I had fun reading it. But how about yourself?
Yeah, I thought it was great fun. I mean, there are times where I couldn't quite imagine this happening on telly in the Heart No era.
Oh yeah,
but it was a hoot. I mean, you do sometimes, or at least I sometimes got a little bit worried that like maybe all of these historical elements are just not going to mesh well. And I would just say it did feel as if the book ended and then we had the rush to London.
Yeah, almost like a tacked on.
Yeah. But still, I mean, I think it was well written. I mentioned earlier about Tim Powers. So Tim Powers is an American fantasy author who does a lot of fantasy historical books. And he wrote, amongst other things, On Stranger Tides, which inspired the Monkey Island games and was also formed part of the basis of a Pirates of the Caribbean movie. And I think Andy Lane has said that this was basically his version of a Tim Powers book.
That's funny you say that because it does feel very like Secret of Monkey Island.
Yeah, so he was inspired by The Stress of Her Regard, which I haven't read, but features various English Romantic era writers. But it reminded me quite a bit of The Drawing of the Dark, which is it's a Tim Powers historical fantasy from the late 70s that starts in Venice, but like in a century earlier, and has all manner of mythological characters and I think some real life characters all kind of thrown into the mix. But this is good fun. I did enjoy it. I mean, there were one or two moments where I kind of feel that some of the language and stuff had got a little bit dated in the years since, maybe. But also, though, quite a bit of that is stuff that we are seeing, I think, from the point of view of Galileo and Shakespeare rather than from the point of view of, like, the narrative voice.
Yeah, I also agree, too, that this doesn't feel like it would, slot in between the Time Meddler and Galaxy 4.
Yeah.
It very much has like one foot in New Adventures territory with the inclusion of Braxiatel and Sontarans and Rutans and Ice Warriors and all that, and like one foot in the Missing Adventures as well. But
it's in lighter. I always say it's a lighter tone than the New Adventures.
Yeah.
I mean, it's more of a romp. I can kind of see why this story lends itself more to a Missing Adventure than kind of like a New Adventure.
Yeah. And for me, like, even though the trio of, the Doctor, Stephen, and Vicky are split up for a fair amount, their storylines do intersect. And at various points, like the dinner with Galileo, where, you know, they all kind of come together and then they split off again in different pairs, and that changes things up in the narrative. And it's quite nice to have that, where it's almost like 2 or 3 different sub pairings within the novel versus, say, someone's off on their own the entire time and just shows up at the end. And I also really appreciated the different scenes and character development. So, I mean, there's some great callbacks to Ian and Barbara in this, outside of Vicky being resentful, you know, towards Barbara for incinerating Sandy. But it helps, I guess, it's an example of how the books can help unpack what the companions are going through and processing some of the danger and trauma they're exposed to, like Stephen and Mechanus and stuff. And I wish there was more of this character-focused examination in more of the books we read. But, you know, after reading 100 or so Doctor Who books with you, you know, it turns out that that's more of a rarity, and it ought not to be, I guess.
Yeah.
There were several different Italian foods and drinks mentioned in this book, which I looked up, including, you know, to see, and they were all real, and some of them are older, but like, apologies on the pronunciation, but Zabagaglione, which I guess is a custard made from eggs, sugar, and Marsala wine. Grappa, an Italian brandy made from pomace, which is the leftover grape seeds, skins, and stems from the winemaking.
Yeah, it's quite strong.
And there's also a lovely scene where Vicky asks the doctor about Susan. At first he's surprised, like, how do you know about Susan? And he's like, well, for starters, you know, you call Vicky Susan mistakenly all the time.
Yes.
But you feel the depths of the doctor's sadness and loneliness there. A couple things I didn't like about the book, and these are minor, but I didn't care for the underlying message of the book, where the doctor, I think, says to Braxiatel towards the end, never try to do anybody a favor. They won't thank you, and it usually goes horribly wrong. And then Braxiatel responds like, yeah, I'm done trying to intervene in things, and I'm just going to go back to collecting instead. Like that. It's kind of like, you know, like a give up on hope type message. And
I don't know if that's I mean, yes, those are sentiments that are expressed, but also as well, like, they are able to, like, the conference is successful. There is peace. And, like, the doctor carries on intervening. More and more so as he progresses through time. So I found a bit more hope in it, I think. Who knows? This could have been a moment where Braxiatel ended up heading towards evil.
Yeah.
This could have been an origin story of, you know, like
the master. or even the monk gets mentioned here, where he's given the name Mortimus. I don't know if that came from this book or if he had been named similarly.
I think that Mortimus was referenced in No Future, which I think predates this book.
And then also, like, pacing wise, I feel like the story does meander a little bit, where it takes time to get all the different pieces in place. And then the denouement actually becomes like almost like a fourth act tacked on with you know, the trip to England at the end. So structurally, like, there could have been a little bit of massaging there, but I still very much enjoyed this one.
I must say, at one point, I lost my place in the book, and then when I thought I'd got my place back correctly, and then I was going, haven't we already had this? And then I was like, oh, okay. I mean, I think possibly that's a bit of a reflection of kind of like sometimes how I read these, where it's just kind of often, you know, in spits and spats on like long, on journeys on the tube or something like that. I think, again, it kind of like suggests that maybe, whilst I was enjoying it when I was reading it, possibly wasn't necessarily absolutely getting all of its hooks into me. But still, I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I don't know what marks are we going to give this. So, Matt, what number would you give if you had to rank it?
Well,
which you do.
Yes. So at the end of chapter 14, the doctor asks, with a good amount of irony, whether there are any more surprises waiting to happen, or wonders whether that's it for the time being. And I found this to be a delightfully rich, if over-egged pudding. I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10.
Okay. I'll give it an 8. It's a strong 8.
Yeah. Mine's a low 9.
Yeah, there's rich characterization there. I mean, it's definitely worth you tracking down, and it's one of these things that, whilst we've obviously given you a synopsis, if you've not read it, I think you'll probably still find great things to enjoy, and yeah, there's great characterization.
Yeah, there's lots of little details, like one we didn't mention. Vicky prefers sleeping outside the TARDIS because she always wakes up tired in the TARDIS because of the dryness of the air and the incessant background humming.
Yeah.
Just little details like that sprinkled in that
Yeah.
really flesh out the characters, and
Yeah.
also nods. I mean, several, we covered a lot of them, but lots we haven't mentioned, like Praxitel's house is on the street of St. John's the Beheaded.
Yes.
And that is where he founds the library, which Andy Lane previously introduced in All Consuming Fire. So there's lots of little timey-wimey nods like that in this too.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it was a high 8 or a low 9, I think, is high praise for it. And it should be relatively easy to find because it was released digitally for free.
Yeah.
And the additional illustrations I enjoyed. It's always nice when those pop up in, especially like Missing Adventures. It's kind of like those old Target novelizations that, a handful have illustrations, and it's a nice little bonus, I would say.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so we're now at a stage where we check out listener feedback.
Yes. And it looks like we have an email.
We do indeed. We have an email from Shag, a long-term listener. He said that he's been catching up on the December and January episodes, covering Endgame, the graphic novel, and also the Third Doctor novel, Last of the Gadarene. And he said that he enjoyed our coverage, and he finds episodes focusing on anthologies or collections to be particularly enjoyable due to the variety of topics. And he said that back in the 90s, it was such an exciting time to collect Doctor Who magazine while the Eighth Doctor comic strips were being published, because those were the only new Eighth Doctor adventures we had as fans back then, because there weren't any BBC books or Big Finish productions. And he said that he was so desperate for more Eighth Doctor fiction that he even ventured into fan fiction and unfortunately discovered what slash fiction was all about.
Or fortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. I mean, yeah.
Depending, but yes.
Horses for courses, yeah. He did want to kind of pick us up on one point, because it was said in the episode that the comic strip collection had possibly spent a bit too much time focused on nostalgia and navel-gazing, celebrating the old TV show. And he could completely understand why we said that if you read it as a collection. But he felt that when reading these 8 pages at a time, month by month, the nostalgia focus felt less pronounced and even appreciated during an era of no new Doctor Who, that's a fair point.
Yeah.
And he felt that Last of the Gadarene was a fantastic read and captured the spirit of the era beautifully. And his only challenge was imagining what the aliens looked like, because based on Mark Gatiss' description, he'd struggled to picture how they could have been realised using 1970s budget and effects, know-how, etc. But beyond that, he agreed with everything discussed in the episode, and his rating would also have been at the higher end.
We never really did find out what that second wind tunnel was for.
No.
There was some speculation, but it was like,
Yes, plot.
a cool set piece.
Yes, but he's also been doing a deep dive into Doctor Who novels, both leading up to and following the recent Gallifrey 1 convention.
Which, unfortunately, there are only going to be 3 more left. It was announced that 3 more years of Gallifrey 1.
Yeah, and so last month, after finishing The Blood Cell, he went back and re-listened to our 2020 episode on the book, and he said it was just like reading on the podcast, but 5 years too late, and he's looking forward to do the same with The Good Doctor. And whilst he was at Gallifrey 1, he met up with Jonathan Morris and praised him for Touched by an Angel, and quite rightly so, because that book is brilliant. And also praised Paul Mars for Scarlet Empress. And Paul was convinced that he remembered Shag's name from somewhere. And so he mentioned, did Shag, our episode about Verdigris to Paul. And reminded him of the audio recording that he performed.
In the grocery store.
The supermarket, yeah. Because Paul had tweeted about it at a time when that was a socially acceptable thing to do. So Shag sort of thanked us again for what he felt were another couple of fantastic episodes, and he's looking forward to more. Yes, so are we.
And we can find Shag on his Fire and Water podcast, and
Yeah.
a couple of others listed there.
Yeah, Once Upon a Geek, JSA in the 90s, because I think he's probably finished the... Well, I know he's finished the GIF and...
The Bwahaha.
Yeah, the Bwahaha era. Yeah, good stuff there. Good stuff.
Very cool.
So what do we have on Blue Sky?
And other socials.
Others.
So we've heard from John Porter, who says he absolutely loved A New Beginning, and especially loved Rachel Stott's art in particular. We heard from Bernard JKG, who said that Titan literally jumped off 13 after this run, as she became fodder for what he calls horrible crossovers with 10, and also jettisoned in favor of the Ruthless Doctor, which is an interesting... I've heard the Fugitive Doctor and the Ruth Doctor, but Ruthless Doctor, I suppose, might fit there. And he said that eventually art would imitate life as Tennant took her job, which is also a little on the nose, but yeah.
Yeah.
But I think we had mentioned that last month, where I think Jodie, the 13th Doctor, still has at least one or two collections with just the fam before it becomes a Marvel team-up story. So we might touch on those someday. We also heard from Talia Cupcake on Blue Sky, who recently discovered the podcast, and she said that one episode's listening had turned into 3. Yay! So who knew we were bingeable? And we also finally heard from longtime listener Keith Say on Blue Sky, who thanked us for our recent podcast about A New Beginning and says it's a new one on me.
Cool.
So glad we could help bring that to more people for awareness.
Yeah.
And Chris, that brings us to what we're going to be doing for the month of May.
Yes. So I was wanting to bring us to a new author, because it's been a while since we've had a new author, and so I was wanting to go off-world, because I toyed up a few things. I wanted to do something truly science fiction-y, fantastical, and I also as well wanted to remember one of my favourite TARDIS crews of the modern era. So we are going to be joining the 11th Doctor and the Ponds as they experience Hunter's Moon by Paul Finch.
I know absolutely nothing about it.
No.
Or what it even looks like.
I do know that the audiobook is read by Arthur Darvill.
Oh.
So that would suggest that Roy has a bit to play in the book. So, yeah, I know he's in it. But, yeah, so there we go.
Lovely.
Hunter's Moon.
For May. Well, and until then, this has been Matt in Minnesota.
Chris in South London. Happy readings. Stay safe.
And beware the Doge.
Watch out for the Doge, yes.
Thank you for listening to the all-new adventures of the Doctor Who Book Club podcast. Special thanks to George C. Music for use of their song Doctor Who Theme Swing Jazz Version. You can follow us on Twitter at ANDWBC Podcast and like us on Facebook. Help other listeners to find us by leaving a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or your podcatcher of choice. You can contact the show by emailing your thoughts to andwbcpodcast@gmail.com. And until next month, happy reading.
Yes, watch out for the Doge. Oh, dear. Yes, as soon as the Doge started rocking up, I just kind of go, what? What?
It was a big eye roll for me. I was like, oh my gosh. Can't escape anywhere.
Yes.